Hello and welcome to the First Impressions podcast. I'm your host, Martin McKay, and along with my friend Chris John Riley, we record the official podcast for the Forum of Incident Response and Security Teams. We look forward to seeing you this year at the 37th Annual FIRST Conference in Copenhagen, Denmark. The dates are June 22nd through June 27th, 2025. And now we join our interview in progress.
This time on the show, we're lucky enough to be talking to Desiree Sacher, Head of Operational IT Security at Finance Informatik in Germany, and Carson Zimmerman, Solutions Architecture Lead for Cyber Defense Operations. Carson, you have to explain that one.
Oh, it's pretty simple. Think of me as the chief architect of Microsoft's SOC. But I'm new, so give me some time to work on that.
Wonderful. Sounds great. You together with Des, are giving a presentation at the upcoming FIRST conference in Copenhagen, talking about burnout, detect, investigate, respond, recover, and prevent. Maybe you can give us a quick rundown of what you're going to be talking about and what the rationale behind the talk is.
And just as importantly, why did you choose this topic to talk about it? It's obviously something near and dear to both Chris and my hearts as well.
Well, we came about it last year's annual conference in Fukuoka when we started talking at lunch. And it was like, well, what are you going to be talking about next? And I was like, there is this thing about burnout because I think I was pretty open about it. I had one 9 years ago, and I'm not going to go into details on how I did run into that, but I definitely faced my limitations, let's call it like that. And I think what is mostly underestimated is how complicated it can be to get out of it, because there's so many things that need to be considered. And I've learned a lot, just like what you can do in like supporting, like for example, what kind of foods, what kind of habits, like, and what it actually is happening to you in your body, because we sometimes feel like burnout, that's just like this mental block and then you're like can't do anymore, but there's so much more happening. And Carson and I, we started talking about that and like what the impact is. And yeah, do you want to add to that,
I think we went from what should I talk about next, Des, to, and about 2 minutes later, we were both like, that's it. We need to talk about burnout. We are in an industry that has a lot of really dedicated people.
Yep.
I see a lot of people in cybersecurity who are really, really motivated by catching bad guys in cyberspace. And that motivation leads to a lot of stress. And as we discuss in our talk, and what we've both learned based on personal experiences and from the people around us, is that too much stress over time becomes burnout. And I've seen enough people who I really respected around me in various places get to burnout, and it led to bad outcomes for their careers, and bad outcomes for their teams, and bad outcomes for everybody. So,
yeah.
and as Des observed, we're not talking about this enough. That's why we're talking about it here.
I mean, I remember when I went to the doctors to get some help, I mean, the main advice was like, these are your sleeping pills and go and take walks in nature. But I mean, it was just like, things are so much more complicated. And I do know that not everywhere in the world it's as easy to get the right kind of support. So I do think it's important. And I also do think that's one of the things that I could see like over the years. I do see this as a cluster problem in cybersecurity because of the way that our culture has grown also over the past 20 plus years, and the way, like, what kind of people it does attract, what kind of business we also have, especially in like SOC environments where you always are under fire, and or incident responders as well. It's just like you need to know how you can manage and handle your stresses. So I do worry that else even more people will run into burnouts. And as it is quite a challenge to get out of it, we definitely wanted to talk and share our lessons learned from it.
I'll share one more point before we go on, and that is Des and I both experienced other talks where the burnout talk specifically, where the talk could be summarized as take breaks and get rest. And I think our mutual reaction is, are you kidding me? come on.
Mhm.
There's surely there's more to it than this. And that's what we want to go into.
And from personal experience, currently, I know that it's seek counseling. Look at people who can give you some of those drugs, whether it's just the sleeping pills or if you need other
Mm.
support on that. And so I'm very interested to hear more about this and what sort of scientific information there is behind it.
We created actually, like, there's like for everything that we're talking about in the talk, there's scientific references that we added to it. So I think we reference about 31 sources, and I think at least 28 of those are studies done and like what specific techniques can help. Because what we try to focus on is really like what is going and working for everyone, and what doesn't have like side effects that like a sleeping pill would have, for example. Because one thing that I experienced really was that my doctor gave me sleeping pills, and when I then got like deeper help, the first thing that I was taken off of was that sleeping pill, because it can have like these hard side effects and you can like grow dependent on it. So you want to build sources and like dependencies that you can actually rely on, and that you don't have like one specific chain only that you need to like worry about or that you need to base your stuff on. So it's like really like what are the kind of foods that you can use, what are the kind of habits that really help you. And I do think that understanding what is actually happening in the body gives you the possibility to also take actions at the right places.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important. I mean, I know, I've been through burnout. I have been going through burnout for a while now, and I, at some point last year, certain tablets that I was taking caused me to have aphasia, which
Mm.
was, for people who don't know, it means you're talking, but the wrong words are coming out. And that's not a particularly nice thing to happen for you or for anyone
Mm.
around you when it happens. But then immediately you have to stop taking those things immediately, have to have an MRI in case there's a bleed in your brain, that kind of thing. And it's like, this is the side effect is almost worse than what caused it. Right. And that,
Mhm.
that's the kind of thing that when you're going through burnout is a setback, and you don't really
Mhm.
want that to happen. But what I really wanted to do was come back a little bit to what you and Carson were saying earlier, is that in security, in IT in general, but I think in
Mhm.
security, we wear overwork as a badge of honor, and this has to
Mhm.
stop. Oh, you didn't do 12 hours over the weekend. You didn't do a capture the flag till 6 o'clock in the morning. Like
Mhm.
you're not writing your own software on GitHub in your spare time while doing security research, while talking at a conference, while trying to do a job. Then what are you even doing? And it's very much like, if you're not doing 15 different things, then you're just wasting your time. And I think that we've grown enough as an industry now to be able to take a step back and say, this is a job. People may love doing what they do, and people may have hobbies on the side, but you need to be able to step back and say, this is too much at certain points, and not expect people to, be doing all of these things all of the time.
There's a question somewhere in there, isn't there?
I'll make a comment. This resonates. There's no question that in our industry, to an extent, the people that I think we really respect and admire, a lot of them wear cybersecurity as kind of a lifestyle, and we need to be very thoughtful of that. Like, I choose to speak at a certain number of conferences a year, and that number is not 50. It's not even 20. Like, I could if I wanted to, but man, I would not be doing a lot of other things. And one of the observations I have, particularly of people who I think are very successful, are they're absolutely ruthless about how they spend their time. So one of the points that we discuss in our talk is enabling people to learn how to be really thoughtful about how they're
Mhm.
spending their hours in their day, and learning how to say no. And that's a big piece of it. And one of the major theses of our talk is it is not just incumbent upon the individual to reduce stress, it is incumbent upon their leadership to reduce the conditions that lead to burnout. And that's critical. And that's one of the things that Des and I are most critical of a lot of other burnout talks, is they focus on the individual. And in our talk, we choose to split it between the individual and the organization.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely blame on both sides. I mean, I've worked in environments where even though they try their best, there's other areas of the organization that are actively fighting against it. So,
Yeah.
we had this theory, I think I've talked about it on the podcast before, of it's called no heroes. Like if you see things, if you pick up the stuff that's failing, are you being helpful? Yes. But are you also covering the fact that there's a gap here and maybe you need extra people? So you end up being the hero, but also you end up overworking yourself. And then suddenly
Yep.
6 months down the line, maybe you're not available anymore. Were you really a hero, or should you have just said, wait a minute, this needs to get
Yeah.
sorted, point it
Bingo.
out, take a
Yep.
step back, right?
There is
Yep.
success and failure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I do see this now that I'm a manager and with like my employees as well, that they try to pick up those pieces, and things need to be like going well sustainably. The sustainable aspect, like how can you sustain doing this in the long term, is the key. And I do think we need to be more concerned on like, is it possible to really do this on the long term? And I mean, health definitely is number one priority, and I do think everyone that is not thinking this way just hasn't come to his limitations or her limitations yet. And the thing really is, it's about yet. I do think, like, just if you look out on what is happening in the world in general, finding your own stability in what you're doing and your own sense of peace and joy is key for everyone. Been working in cybersecurity now for 20 years. And it's only in 2018, so about 7 years ago, that I actually started to like not try to be the best analyst anymore and not try to like work through those. I think I had about 5 or 7 reverse engineering books sitting on my pal, but actually admitting to myself that my talent lies in structuring information and like creating processes and decision trees and all these kind of things, and like analyzing what is going wrong somewhere and then showing how it could be done better and differently, and coming to that acceptance that I don't need to compare myself to all of those very advanced and very well regarded hackers and creators in the scene, but that I'm me and that I need to find my own, let's call it quality or passion, or like what is that makes me special. And I think that's the key. Also really accepting that there is space for me like this.
Sounds like next year's talk is going to be on imposter syndrome, but I digress.
Ooh, I love that.
Another thing to remember, though, is people have to understand that burnout is not just job related. It's also your family life, the environment you live in, all these other things that are equally as important that a lot of us try to compartmentalize as separate issues.
Martin, I agree. There's a bunch of pieces to this, and I'll give you a spoiler. I'm already thinking about one of my next talks being on neurodiversity in cybersecurity. It is my observation, very unscientific, when I have stood up at several conferences now and asked the room, how many people here are neurodiverse? Roughly a third to one half of the hands in the audience go up. And I was stunned. I was like, this is nuts. Why are we not talking about this? How does this relate to burnout? The way neurodiverse minds, in particular those with ADHD and those people who are on spectrum, autism spectrum disorder, their minds work somewhat differently, and the way they respond to both stress and stimuli is somewhat different than neurotypical people. And as a consequence, many of them also have family members who have adapted to their neurospicy behaviors. I know many people who are neurodiverse, and they have very kind, very loving partners or spouses and family members who support them in that regard. So that's something I'm thoughtful of, and actually something I'm really looking forward to talking more about and doing more research on. I think it's an underaddressed area in the industry.
And I bet half of the people who didn't raise their hands were just either masking or hadn't recognized that they were neurodivergent themselves.
It's very possible. And the very interesting thing is seeing people in the industry who you can look at them and look at the behavior. And if you know them for over the course of several months and interact with them, you can see that neurodiversity through how they behave. And they may not know it. And the fun situations is where they don't know it. They're very clearly neurodiverse. And it's like, are you aware, or have you looked into blank?
Yeah, I'm one of those people. The first time I realized I was neurodivergent and I told a friend, he was like, "You didn't realize it?" And he came back like 3 times that night going, "You really did not realize it."
I still remember when my doctor said, we should send you on an ADHD appointment. And then they sent me an appointment for a 5-hour ADHD test. And I'm not quite sure they understood what people with ADHD would sit there and put up with. But a 5-hour test is not one of those things. I think the test was, if you agree to it, you don't have ADHD.
I have heard of other
Yeah.
people actually that also like wanted to get themselves tested for ADHD, and the test itself was so overwhelming that they couldn't follow through with it. So it's
Well, and we've
no,
gone pretty far off topic, but I'll say one thing: the coincidence of ADHD and other neurodivergent behaviors like anxiety and autism spectrum are very high, so then they compound. So bringing this back to burnout and whatnot is having that self-awareness of how you respond to those stimuli in the context of stress and burnout is really interesting and something I strongly encourage everyone to look after.
This is not just a and B, therefore you have burnout. Yep. This is a much more complex situation, very individual. Everyone has their own journey. And I'm excited to hear about how you've researched that journey from your experiences, from people you've talked to, from research you've done. And I'm sure Martin and I can talk to you about our journeys over a coffee at the conference, certainly.
Or maybe scotch, or...
I love this plan.
I guess the big question, is there anything we haven't asked you that you'd like to tell people who maybe are coming to the conference and thinking about attending the talk, or maybe they can't attend, but they're going to look at the slides afterwards? What would you like them to know?
Do you think, I mean, Carson and I, we both plan to present this TLP Green. So we're going to be sharing about our own experiences, but really in this chamber that we received there. And I think the most important thing for us is really that we can share this information, these coincidences or patterns that we've recognized, how hopefully put more things for you that you can apply in your own life instead of only take walks and sleep more and have time with friends. It's really, there's way more to do than those things. So I do think that's going to be interesting for everyone.
I'll offer a short speech, and I'm gonna take a short walk, and I'm gonna come to your question. A good friend of mine about 15 years ago, after a black hat, heard Dan Kaminsky talk, and during Dan Kaminsky's talk, someone raised their hand and asked Dan a very pointed question that argued against what Dan was saying, and they were like gasp from the crowd. This is like third-hand information now. And my friend, in telling this story, was like, he's just a guy. At the end of the day, he's just a guy. I'm just a guy. Des is just a gal, etc. And where am I going with all this? I literally wrote the book on security operations, then co-wrote the second edition. You can download it. Don't pay for it, by the way. What the audience needs to hear from people like Des and I as cybersecurity professionals is that we are not immune. No one is immune to this, and we need to hold ourselves and or organizations and their leadership to a standard that throttles stress, recognizes burnout, and puts in place the right controls to fight against it, because not everyone's stress tolerance and burnout threshold is the same. We look at some people, we look at the top 1% or 5% of people we think are amazing and see, oh, they can work 70 hours a week. Well, guess what? Most people can't and sustain and be brilliant people working 70 hours a week. So embrace it and deal with it. So that's part of our thinking here within our talk.
On that note, Desiree, Carson, thank you very much for taking some time before the conference to talk to us.
Thank you very much for having us. Yes.
My pleasure.
You've been listening to the First Impressions podcast, the official podcast for the Forum of Incident Response and Security Teams. We thank you for listening, and you can find out more at first.org, and we hope to see you in Copenhagen, Denmark, June 22nd through 27th. Thanks and goodbye.